Axel refused to eat, refused to move, like leaving that spot meant something would get out. Metal screeches through the silence as Caleb drags the rusted freezer aside, dust choking the air, his pulse spiking like he's back in a hot zone. Axel's low growl vibrates against the floor, eyes locked on something behind the wall, something Caleb can't see, but can feel. The freezer hadn't moved in years. Caleb could tell the moment he put his hands on it. The metal was cold in a way that didn't match the room, like it had been holding on to winter longer than everything else. His fingers tightened along the rusted edge, testing it the way he used to test doors back in places where doors could get you killed. No sudden pull, no full commitment, just pressure. Listen. Wait. Nothing answered. Behind him, Axel didn't shift. That alone was enough to keep Caleb from moving. The dog stood 10 feet back from the wall, weight forward, ears locked in a hard point. Not barking, not whining, just staring, the way he did when something didn't belong. Caleb exhaled slowly, more through habit than calm. "Yeah," he muttered, barely above a whisper. "I see it." The shop around them sat in layers of dust and silence. Broken stems still filled cracked vases along the shelves, their colors long gone, brittle as bone. A faint, sweet rot hung in the air, old flowers left too long in water that wasn't there anymore. It wasn't the smell that bothered him. It was how quiet everything else was. No hum of refrigeration, no pipes ticking, no insects. Just the weight of a place that had been sealed and forgotten. Caleb braced one boot against the tile and pulled. The freezer groaned. Metal scraped concrete with a sound that cut straight through him, sharp, dragging, too close to the grinding echo of armored doors back in Helmand. His shoulders tensed before his mind caught up, breath hitching, body already halfway turned like he expected incoming. Nothing came, just the echo fading into dust. Axel didn't break his stare. Caleb dragged the freezer another inch, then another, each movement deliberate. Slow enough to stop if something shifted, fast enough to not lose nerve. The back wall began to show, not drywall, not wood, smooth, wrong. He paused, hand still on the freezer, eyes narrowing as he leaned in. The paint didn't match the rest of the wall. Same color, but flatter. Cleaner, like it had been applied later, over something meant to stay hidden. Axel stepped forward once, stopped. Caleb followed the dog's line of sight. There, a seam, thin, vertical, barely visible unless you were looking for it. He crouched, brushing dust away with the back of his hand. The line sharpened, not a crack, a door. The kind built to disappear. Caleb didn't touch it right away. His breathing slowed, falling into that old rhythm, counting without numbers, feeling the space. Corners, angles. What he couldn't see mattered more than what he could. He glanced back. Axel hadn't moved, but the dog's muscles were coiled now, ready, waiting on him. "All right," Caleb said under his breath. "We clear it together." He shifted closer. One hand hovered near the seam. The other stayed loose at his side, fingers flexing once like they remembered a weapon that wasn't there. The shop pressed in around him. Still. Dead. He leaned in just enough to see the edge of a recessed handle buried under layers of paint. That's when he heard it. A soft metallic click. Not loud. Not forced. Just there. From the other side. Caleb froze. Every muscle locked in place, breath cut short before it could make a sound. His head tilted slightly, listening past the ringing in his ears, past the memory trying to bleed in. Axel let out a low sound, barely a growl, more vibration than voice. Caleb didn't move his eyes from the door. The silence came back, thick, unbroken. But it wasn't the same silence as before. He knew the difference. He had learned it the hard way. This one wasn't empty. "Someone in there?" he said quietly. No answer. Only the faint creak of the building settling somewhere above them. Caleb's jaw tightened. He leaned in closer, just enough to feel the cold coming off the metal through the paint. His hand hovered inches from the hidden handle. Axel took one slow step forward, stopped again. Waiting. Caleb swallowed, throat dry, eyes fixed on that seam that shouldn't exist. The kind of door you don't build unless you're trying to keep something in, or keep something out. He reached for it, then stopped. Because the silence on the other side felt like it was listening back. And for a second, just a second, it felt like he wasn't the first one to find it. Caleb pulled his hand away from the seam. Not a full retreat, just enough to break contact. Axel didn't relax. Neither did he. The air in the shop had shifted, subtle, but wrong. Like stepping into a room after someone else just left, and the heat hadn't settled yet. Caleb stayed crouched for another second, listening, counting the space in his head the way he used to count rooftops and windows in a foreign street. No second sound came. No movement. Just that same heavy quiet pressing in from all sides. "Not tonight," he said under his breath. Axel's ears flicked once. Caleb stood, slow and controlled, never turning his back on the wall until he had space between them. He dragged the freezer just enough to cover part of the seam again. Not fully, not carelessly. Just enough to make it less obvious from across the room. Axel backed up with him, step for step. They didn't stay. Outside, the night air hit colder than it should have. The kind of mountain cold that sank straight through your jacket and settled in your bones. Caleb locked the front door behind them, the click of the deadbolt louder than it needed to be. The street was empty. Half the buildings along Silver Creek's main strip sat dark, windows boarded or cracked, signs faded into shapes instead of words. A single streetlight buzzed at the far end, flickering like it couldn't decide if it wanted to stay on. Caleb scanned the block out of habit. Corners, rooftops, reflections in the glass. Nothing moved. Axel stood close to his leg now, no longer fixed on the shop, but not at ease either. The dog's tail stayed low, not tucked, just ready. Caleb opened the truck door. The old pickup groaned in protest, same as it always did. He slid into the driver's seat and shut the door, sealing them into the small, familiar space that had become the closest thing to a home. Axel climbed in without needing a command, turning once before settling across the passenger side, head angled toward the window. Caleb didn't start the engine. He just sat there, hands resting on the wheel, breathing. For a minute, it was quiet enough to pretend the world had narrowed down to just the truck, just him, just the dog. Then a car door slammed somewhere across the lot. The sound cracked through him like a shot. Before his mind caught it, his body moved, dropping low, shoulder hitting the steering column, breath gone, pulse spiking hard and fast. His hand came up empty where something used to be. His eyes snapped to the mirrors, scanning for movement, angles, threats. Axel was already up, not barking, just watching, focused, present. Caleb stayed like that for a second too long. Then the shape of the gas station across the street settled back into place. A man stepped out of a sedan, arguing into his phone, oblivious to everything else. No threat, no contact. Caleb exhaled slowly, dragging air back into his lungs like he had to remember how. "Yeah," he muttered. "Stateside." Axel lowered himself again, but didn't take his eyes off the window. Caleb leaned back in the seat, staring through the cracked windshield at nothing in particular. The dashboard light flickered faintly, casting just enough glow to see the edge of his hands. They weren't steady. He flexed his fingers once, then gripped the wheel tighter until the tremor stopped. 3 days earlier, this truck had been the only thing left that still ran. 3 days earlier, he hadn't known about the shop. He reached over and pulled the folded envelope from the glove compartment. The paper was worn now, creased from being opened too many times in too short a span. His mother's name sat at the top. He hadn't said it out loud in years. He unfolded the page just enough to see the address again. Vivian's Garden, Silver Creek, a place he'd never visited, a place she'd chosen over him. At least, that's what he'd told himself long enough for it to feel like truth. Axel shifted, pressing his nose lightly against Caleb's arm. Grounding. Caleb glanced at the dog, then back at the paper. "Guess we're staying," he said quietly. Outside, the man finished his call and disappeared into the station. The door shut. The lights hummed. Everything settled again. But the feeling from the shop didn't fade. That door. That sound. Caleb folded the paper and slid it back into the glove compartment. His eyes drifted to the dark line of the street leading back toward the shop. He knew the difference between empty and waiting. And whatever sat behind that wall wasn't done waiting. Morning came thin and gray over Silver Creek, the kind of light that didn't warm anything, just revealed what the dark had been hiding. Caleb was already awake. He hadn't really slept. The truck seat had left a dull ache in his back, but it wasn't the discomfort that kept him up. Every time his eyes closed, the shape of that seam came back, sharp, deliberate, wrong in a way that didn't belong to an abandoned flower shop. Axel was awake too, not restless, just alert. The dog lifted his head the moment Caleb shifted, eyes tracking him, waiting for direction that hadn't been spoken yet. Caleb rubbed a hand across his face, then reached for the door. "Let's go take another look," he said. Axel was already moving before the words finished. The street was quieter in daylight, but not better. The emptiness showed itself more clearly. Faded signs, cracked sidewalks, weeds pushing through concrete like they'd decided they owned the place now. Vivian's Garden sat at the corner, same as it had the night before. The sign above the door was barely readable, paint stripped down to ghosts of letters. Caleb unlocked the door. The smell hit again, stronger in the morning. Sweet and stale, like something that had once been alive and then slowly forgot how. He stepped inside. Didn't rush. Didn't hesitate either. Axel moved ahead this time. Not wandering. Clearing. The dog checked the front room first. Quick passes, nose low, then higher along the edges of the counters. He paused at the back hallway, ears flicking, then continued, confirming each space the way he'd been trained. Caleb watched him work. Professional. Not a pet. Not just a companion. "Clear?" Caleb asked quietly. Axel glanced back once, then continued toward the rear of the shop. That was enough. Caleb followed. The freezer still sat pulled away from the wall, just enough to expose the hidden seam again. In daylight, it looked less like a shadow and more like a decision someone had made. Measured, intentional, built to last. He crouched in front of it, ran his fingers along the edge again. Cold. Same as last night. No sound this time. No click. Just the faint hum of nothing. Caleb stayed there longer than he meant to, listening, waiting for something that didn't repeat. Behind him, Axel stopped moving. Caleb didn't turn right away. He already knew what the dog was looking at. "Back door?" he asked. Axel didn't answer. Didn't need to. Caleb stood slowly and turned. The rear exit sat half open. He hadn't left it that way. A thin line of morning light cut across the floor, stopping just short of the workroom. Caleb's posture changed without thinking. weight forward, shoulders low, eyes scanning. He moved toward the door, each step placed with care, avoiding loose debris, keeping his line of sight clear. His breathing slowed again, controlled, quiet. Axel stayed just behind his right leg, close enough to move, far enough not to block. Caleb reached the door and paused, listened. Nothing outside but wind brushing through the empty buildings. He pushed the door open wider with 2 fingers. The alley behind the shop stretched narrow and quiet. Gravel scattered unevenly. A few broken crates stacked along the wall. No fresh tire tracks. No obvious footprints. But something felt off. Caleb stepped out just enough to check angles. Left, right, rooftops, clear. He looked down. There. Near the threshold, a mark in the dust. Not a full footprint, just a partial impression, like someone had stepped carefully, trying not to leave one. The heel had caught just enough dirt to press into the ground. Fresh. Caleb crouched, studying it. Size of a boot. Not his. Not from yesterday. He didn't touch it. Didn't need to. Axel stepped forward, nose hovering over the mark. The dog didn't sniff long, just enough to confirm, then his head lifted, eyes locking onto the far end of the alley. Tracking. Someone had been here. Not long ago. Caleb stood, scanning again, slower this time. Yeah, he said quietly. We're not alone. The wind shifted, carrying the faintest scent of something metallic. Oil, maybe, or machinery. Not from the shop. From somewhere nearby. Caleb backed into the doorway, pulling the rear door closed without taking his eyes off the alley. Inside felt no safer. Just contained. He turned back toward the workroom, toward the freezer, toward the door behind it. Axel followed, closer now than before. Protective. Caleb stopped a few feet from the wall. The seam looked the same. Silent. Still. But the feeling had changed. Last night, it had been waiting. Now something outside was too, and suddenly Caleb wasn't sure which one he should be more concerned about. He glanced down at Axel. The dog's ears were still forward, still locked. But not at the wall anymore, at the front of the shop. Caleb's eyes shifted with him, toward the entrance, toward the street, where someone could be standing, watching. Caleb didn't move at first. He let his eyes adjust to the front of the shop, to the warped glass of the display window and the dull reflection it gave back. Shapes outside blurred into each other. Light, shadow, empty street. Nothing obvious. But Axel didn't stare at nothing. Caleb shifted his weight quietly, stepping off to the side instead of walking straight toward the door. Different angle. Different line of sight. The reflection changed. A figure stood across the street. Still. Watching the shop. Caleb's jaw tightened. Yeah, he murmured. Thought so. The man didn't hide when their eyes met through the glass. Didn't turn away either. Just stood there for another second, like he'd been expecting Caleb to notice. Then he crossed the street. Not hurried, not cautious. Like he belonged there. Axel moved half a step forward, placing himself between Caleb and the door without a command. No growl, just position. Caleb led him. The front door opened with a low creak. The man stepped inside, bringing cold air with him. Mid-40s, clean jacket, boots too new for this town. His posture was easy, balanced. Someone used to walking into places that weren't his and making them his anyway. He stopped a few feet in, taking in the shop like it was already part of a ledger somewhere. Caleb Brooks, he said, voice calm, measured. Figured that'd be you. Caleb didn't answer right away. He watched the man's hands, empty, but relaxed in a way that suggested they didn't need to be anything else. "Depends who's asking," Caleb said. The man smiled slightly. "Victor Hale." He didn't offer a hand. Didn't need to. The name carried enough weight on its own. "I own a few properties around here," Hale continued, glancing toward the windows, the ceiling, the walls. "Most of this block, actually." Caleb leaned against the counter, keeping his distance. Axel didn't move. Hale's eyes dropped to the dog for just a moment longer than casual. "German Shepherd," he said. "Military?" Caleb didn't confirm it. Didn't deny it either. Hale nodded like he'd gotten the answer anyway. "Good animals," he went on. "They pick up on things. Better than we do sometimes." Axel's ears twitched. Caleb noticed. "So what do you want?" Caleb asked. Hale stepped further into the room, slow, controlled, like he understood the space mattered. "This place," he said simply. "I'd like to take it off your hands." Caleb almost laughed. "Off my hands," he repeated. Hale glanced around again, taking in the dust, the broken shelves, the dead arrangements. "It's been sitting here a long time," he said. "Needs more work than it's worth. Plumbing's probably gone. Electrical, too. Foundation might not be great. Town's not exactly growing." He reached into his coat and pulled out a card, setting it gently on the counter. "I can offer you something fair," he said. "Cash. Quick. No hassle." Caleb didn't look at the card. "Why?" Hale's smile didn't change. "Because I see opportunity where other people see problems." Caleb pushed off the counter slightly, closing a bit of distance. Not aggressive, just enough to shift the dynamic. "You own most of the block," he said. "You said that yourself." "I do." "So what's one more broken shop to you?" Hale tilted his head. "Sometimes," he said, "it's the last piece that matters." Axel shifted again. Not forward. Sideways, adjusting his angle to keep both men in view. Hale noticed that too. His eyes flicked down, then back up to Caleb. "Dogs sense things we don't," he said quietly. "Sometimes things better left buried." The words hung there. Caleb didn't react outwardly. Inside, something tightened. "Funny," Caleb said after a second. "Seems like you've already decided what's buried here." Hale held his gaze, just making an educated guess. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows, carrying a faint rattle through the frame. Caleb glanced once toward the back of the shop, toward the wall, toward the door behind it, then back to Hale. "I just got here," Caleb said. "Haven't decided anything." Hale nodded like that was expected. "Take your time," he said. "But not too much. Opportunities don't stay still." He turned toward the door, then paused. "One more thing," he added, glancing back over his shoulder. "If you hear things in a place like this, it's usually the building settling. A beat. Usually." Then he stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind him. The sound echoed through the shop. Caleb stood there a moment longer, eyes fixed on the closed door. Axel didn't move until the sound of Hale's footsteps faded completely. Then the dog turned his head, back toward the rear of the shop, toward the wall, the seam hidden behind the freezer. Caleb followed his gaze. The room felt smaller now, tighter, like something had shifted again while they weren't looking. He walked back slowly, each step measured. The freezer still sat where he'd left it, the seam still visible, still silent. But now there was something else layered over it. Not just waiting, not just watching. Someone else knew it was there, and they wanted it. Caleb didn't touch the door. Not yet. He stood there for a long moment, eyes fixed on the seam, letting the weight of that thought settle in his chest. The room felt tighter than it had minutes ago, like the walls had shifted closer without making a sound. Axel moved first. The dog stepped toward the freezer again, slow, deliberate, nose low. He traced the edge of the metal, then the floor, then the wall, not sniffing for curiosity, tracking, confirming. Caleb watched. "Same spot," he said quietly. Axel didn't look back. He pressed his nose near the seam again, then lifted his head sharply, ears snapping forward. Not toward the wall this time, toward the front of the shop. Caleb followed his line of sight, but the door remained closed. No shadows moved across the glass. No footsteps. Still, the feeling didn't leave. Axel turned back to the wall, and this time he scratched. Not hard, not frantic. Just one slow drag of his paw across the metal, a soft rasp that cut through the silence. Then he stopped, looked at Caleb, waited. Caleb exhaled through his nose. "Yeah," he muttered. "You're not letting that go." He stepped closer, crouching beside the freezer. His hand hovered near the seam again, but he didn't reach for the handle, not with daylight still spilling through the windows, not with Hale's presence still lingering like a shadow. Timing mattered. It always had. "You hear something in there last night?" he asked. Axel didn't respond the way people expected dogs to. No bark, no whine, just a stillness that meant more. Caleb nodded once. "Yeah, me too." The shop creaked softly as the temperature shifted, wood adjusting, pipes settling. Normal sounds. Except now they weren't. Every noise carried weight. Every shadow had edges. Caleb stood and stepped back. "We do this right," he said. "Not rushed." Axel stayed where he was. Didn't follow. Caleb stopped halfway across the room and turned. The dog hadn't moved from the freezer. Not an inch. "Axel," Caleb called. Nothing. The dog remained locked on the wall, body angled slightly forward, like he was guarding it now instead of just watching. Caleb walked back. "Hey." He reached down, resting a hand lightly against Axel's neck. The fur there was warm, steady, grounded. "Not going anywhere," Caleb said. "I get it." Axel finally shifted, just enough to acknowledge him, but his eyes didn't leave the seam. Caleb straightened and glanced around the shop. He needed to move, needed to clear the rest of the space before going deeper. Routine. Structure. Things that kept you alive when your head started drifting. He grabbed a broom from the corner and started working the front room. Slow, methodical strokes, pushing dust into piles, clearing the floor inch by inch. Not because it mattered, because it gave him control, because it gave him time. Axel didn't join him. The dog stayed at the back, planted in front of the freezer like a sentry. Every so often, Caleb glanced over. Same position, same focus. Hours passed that way. Light shifted through the windows, turning from gray to pale gold, then flattening again as clouds rolled in. The street outside stayed quiet. No return from Hale. No sign of whoever had left the footprint behind the shop. But Axel never left that wall. Not even when Caleb set down a dented bowl of water. Not even when he opened a can of food. The dog didn't touch it. Just stood there, watching, waiting. Caleb felt it then. Not fear, not exactly. Something closer to pressure building behind the ribs, the kind that told him this wasn't going away on its own. He walked back to the freezer, stopped beside Axel. "You think it's still there?" he asked. Axel didn't move. Caleb crouched again, closer this time, his shoulder nearly brushing the metal. The cold seeped through his jacket immediately. He leaned in, pressed his ear lightly against the surface. For a second, there was nothing, just the faint echo of his own breathing. Then something shifted. Not loud, not clear, but real. A faint, hollow sound, like something settling deeper inside. Caleb pulled back instantly, breath catching before he could stop it. Axel stepped forward, body tightening, a low vibration starting in his chest. Not a bark. A warning. Caleb's pulse picked up. "Yeah," he whispered. He looked at the seam again, the handle hidden beneath paint, the space behind it. Whatever was inside that room wasn't empty, and Axel wasn't going anywhere until Caleb opened it. Caleb stayed crouched a moment longer, eyes fixed on the seam, breath slow but shallow. The faint sound he'd heard hadn't come again, but it didn't need to. It had already done its job. Confirmed. Something was on the other side. He leaned back on his heels, running a hand over his mouth, thinking. Not rushing, never rushing. That was how you walked into something you didn't walk out of. "All right," he said quietly. "We do it clean." Axel shifted closer. Caleb stood, scanning the room again out of habit. Front door closed. Windows clear. No movement outside. Back exit latched. No new sounds. Still contained. For now. He stepped back to the wall and took hold of the freezer again. This time he didn't hesitate. He dragged it fully aside, metal screaming against the floor, the sound echoing through the shop like it didn't belong there. The entire door came into view, not makeshift, not hidden by accident. Solid steel set flush into the wall, edges sealed tight under layers of old paint. A recessed handle sat at chest height, barely visible unless you knew where to look. Someone had built this to last. Caleb wiped his hand across it, clearing away dust. Cold. Colder than the room. Axel moved ahead of him, stepping into position just off Caleb's right side, close enough to react, far enough not to block. Caleb nodded once. "Check corners first," he muttered. Not for the dog, for himself. He reached for the handle, paused, listened. Nothing. He pulled. The door resisted for half a second, then gave with a dull, heavy click. The sound echoed inward, not outward. Caleb's grip tightened. He pulled the door open slowly. The air that came out was different. Cool. Dry. Not the stale rot of the shop, something preserved. Axel didn't rush in. He leaned forward, nose testing the air, body angled, ready to move or pull back. Caleb held the door halfway open and waited. 3 seconds. 5. 10. Nothing moved. No sound. No shift. Axel stepped forward first. One step. Then another. He crossed the threshold, head low, scanning left, right, forward. His body stayed tight, controlled, ready. Caleb followed. The room was small, no more than 8 feet across. But it was intact, untouched. A single overhead bulb hung from a pull chain near the doorway. Caleb reached up and gave it a short tug. The light flickered once, then steadied. The room came into view. A desk sat against the far wall, surface clean except for a stack of worn notebooks, neatly aligned. A metal filing cabinet stood beside it, each drawer labeled in faded marker. Shelves lined the opposite wall, filled with folders, envelopes, and small boxes arranged with careful precision. No dust. Not like the rest of the shop. This place had been sealed, protected. Caleb stepped inside slowly, eyes moving across every detail. "Jesus," he muttered. Axel circled once, checking corners, then stopped near the desk. His posture shifted, less rigid now, but still alert. Clear enough. For now. Caleb approached the desk, ran his fingers lightly over the surface. Clean. Too clean. Like someone had been here right before the door closed. He picked up the top notebook, worn leather cover, edges softened from use. He opened it. The handwriting inside was steady, controlled. Line after line of entries, each one dated, each one structured. Not random, not personal, organized. Names, addresses, amounts, notes. Caleb's brow tightened as he read. Rent short, covered 300, husband out of work, referred to. He stopped, flipped a page. Another name, another situation, another amount. This wasn't a flower shop ledger. It was something else entirely. Axel shifted behind him, nails clicking softly against the concrete. Caleb turned one more page and froze. At the top of the entry, his name. Not as the subject, but in a line written beneath the date. If Caleb ever finds this. His hand tightened slightly on the page. He needs to know I didn't leave. The words sat there, simple, unmistakable. I was building something. The room went quiet again, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. This one didn't feel empty. It felt full. Full of things Caleb didn't understand yet. He lowered the notebook slowly, eyes moving across the rest of the room, the files, the folders, the careful order of everything. This wasn't a secret someone buried to forget. This was something someone protected, left behind, for someone else to find. Behind him, Axel stepped closer, pressing lightly against Caleb's leg, grounding him. Caleb exhaled, long and slow. Yeah, he said quietly. His eyes drifted to the far corner of the room. A small steel box sat there, locked, waiting. We're not done. Caleb didn't move toward the lockbox. Not yet. He set the notebook back down exactly where he'd found it, aligning the edges without thinking. Like the way you reset gear after use. Same place, same angle, nothing left out of line. Axel stayed close, closer than before. The dog's shoulder pressed lightly against Caleb's leg, steady and warm, a quiet reminder that the world still existed outside the walls of this room. Caleb reached for the second notebook. Opened it slower this time. Different entries, same structure, same precision. But the details cut deeper. Veteran, denied VA support, rent due in 5 days, covered partial. Caleb's jaw tightened. He turned the page. Woman, 2 children, no heat, arranged temporary stay, supplies delivered. Another page. Boy, 16, nowhere to go, called Pastor Miller, safe placement. The handwriting never changed. No hesitation, no emotion written into the lines. Just facts, decisions, outcomes, like mission reports. Caleb leaned back slightly, eyes moving across the pages without flipping them. He knew this format, had written versions of it himself. Different places, different stakes, same need for clarity. You don't leave space for doubt when people are depending on the result. He flipped again. More names, more situations, and always, at the bottom, a number, an amount, money that had come from somewhere, gone somewhere, tracked, accounted for. Axel shifted slightly, his nails clicking once on the floor. Caleb glanced down. The dog wasn't watching the door anymore, wasn't scanning corners. He was watching Caleb. Not alert, not tense, just there. Like he knew this part mattered. Caleb swallowed, then looked back at the page. Mr. Reyes, shop owner, behind on payments. Covered 2 months. Will not accept charity. Framed as loan. Caleb let out a short breath through his nose. Yeah, he muttered. Sounds about right. He flipped to the back of the notebook. The entries got shorter, spacing between them wider. Dates stretching out. Something had changed. Not the work. The pace. He picked up the third notebook. This one felt lighter, worn differently. The first few pages told him why. The handwriting was smaller, tighter, like the person writing it was conserving strength. Doctor confirmed. Timeline unclear. Continue as long as possible. Caleb froze on the line. Didn't read it twice, didn't need to. His eyes moved to the next entry. Told Diane today. She wants me to stop. Says I need to think about Caleb. His grip on the page tightened slightly. She's not wrong. But she doesn't understand. This is how I am thinking about him. Caleb's breath slowed. Not steady, just controlled. He kept reading. If I leave nothing behind, then she's right. Then Caleb inherits a failure, and a story that isn't true. A faint sound slipped out of him. Not quite a laugh. Not quite anything else. Axel's head tilted slightly. Caleb kept his eyes on the page. This place isn't a shop. It's a door. People walk in carrying things they can't hold alone. I just help them set it down. The words hung there. Simple. Clear. Caleb blinked once, hard. His vision shifted for a second. Light bending wrong, edges sharpening, like his brain was trying to place himself somewhere else. Not here. Sand. Heat. A doorway in a village halfway across the world. Same feeling. People coming through, carrying things they couldn't hold. He shut the memory down before it could take shape. Back in the room, back in Silver Creek. He exhaled slowly. Door, he murmured. Axel pressed closer. Caleb reached out, resting his hand briefly on the dog's neck. Grounding, always grounding. He turned another page. The entries grew shorter still. More gaps, more space between dates. But the pattern never broke. Help given, problems solved, names recorded. He reached the last page. The writing there was uneven. Still controlled, but strained. If Caleb finds this, it means he stayed long enough to look. Caleb's throat tightened. That's all I needed him to do. He stared at the line. Didn't move. Didn't breathe for a second. Axel shifted again, pressing his weight more firmly against Caleb's leg. Caleb lowered the notebook slowly. His eyes drifted across the room again. The files. The folders. The careful system. This wasn't a side project. This was everything. Everything she had built. Everything she had chosen. And it wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was deliberate. Focused. Relentless. Caleb's gaze settled on the lockbox in the corner. Steel. Closed. Waiting. He pushed himself to his feet. Slow. Measured. The room felt different now. Not smaller. Not tighter. Just clearer. Like the shape of it had finally come into focus. Axel moved with him. Step for step. Caleb walked toward the lockbox. Stopped just in front of it. His hand hovered over the lid. Not opening it yet. Not rushing. Because whatever was inside was the next layer. And he wasn't stepping into it blind. All right, he said quietly. His voice steadier now. Let's see what you were really building. Caleb crouched in front of the lockbox. Up close, it looked older than the rest of the room. The green paint was chipped along the edges, metal exposed beneath in thin scratches that caught the light. The lock itself was simple. No digital keypad, no complex mechanism, just a keyhole. Axel shifted beside him, not tense, not relaxed either. Watching. Caleb ran his fingers along the edge of the box, then checked the underside, the back, the hinge. Habit. You don't open something sealed without understanding how it's meant to stay closed. No traps, no wires, nothing hidden. Just locked. Key's got to be here, he muttered. He stood and moved back to the desk. The drawers slid open one by one. Inside, more order. Pens aligned, paper stacked. Nothing random. Nothing out of place. Whoever built this room didn't leave loose ends. Caleb checked the underside of the desk. Nothing. He turned to the filing cabinet, opened the top drawer. Labels stared back at him in neat rows. Families, housing, medical, legal. He paused at the last one. Legal. Pulled it open. Folders filled the space, each one marked with names, dates, notes written in the same steady hand he'd seen in the journals. Axel let out a low sound behind him. Not a growl. A warning. Caleb froze. His head turned slightly, listening. From the front of the shop, a faint shift. Not loud, but there. Footsteps. Caleb moved instantly. Drawer closed without a sound. He stepped out of the hidden room, killing the light with a quick pull of the chain. Darkness swallowed the space behind him as he eased the door shut, leaving it just cracked enough to slip back through. Axel was already in position, low, facing the front. Caleb moved past him, keeping to the wall, avoiding the center of the room where the floorboards creaked louder. His breathing slowed again, controlled, quiet. Another step outside, closer this time. Caleb reached the edge of the workroom and stopped. Listened. The front door didn't open. No voice called out. Just presence. Axel's body tightened. Caleb leaned slightly, angling his view toward the front window. A shadow passed across the glass. Then another. Not one person. Two. Caleb's jaw set. Stay, he whispered. Axel didn't move. Caleb slipped toward the back exit instead, hand brushing the wall to guide his steps without looking. He eased the door open just enough to step into the alley again. Cold air hit his face. He moved along the wall, silent, boots placed carefully in the gravel to avoid crunching too loud. The alley stretched empty until he reached the corner. He stopped, listened. Voices now, low, just around the edge of the building. Told you someone was here, one said. Doesn't matter, we check and go, the other replied. Caleb stayed still, not engaging, not yet. Axel wasn't with him. That mattered. Caleb leaned just enough to catch a glimpse. Two men. Work jackets. Not locals. Too clean. Too focused. Not looking around the way people do when they're curious. Looking the way people do when they're searching. He pulled back. Slow. Careful. Back through the door. Closed it without sound. Axel turned his head toward him immediately. Caleb gave a small nod. Yeah, he whispered. We got company. The dog's ears stayed forward. Ready. Caleb moved back toward the hidden room. Not rushing, but not delaying either. The game had changed. Someone else wasn't just watching anymore. They were checking, verifying, which meant time wasn't on his side. He slipped back into the hidden room and shut the door fully this time. The air inside felt different again. Not safe, just contained. He moved straight to the filing cabinet, pulled the legal drawer open again. Faster now. More direct. Folders slid under his hand until one name caught his eye. Hale. He stopped, pulled it free. The tab read, Hale Holdings. Caleb's pulse picked up slightly. He flipped it open. Documents, property transfers, Signatures, copies of deeds, notes written in the margins. Short, precise, signature inconsistent. Owner claims no recollection. Value significantly below market. Page after page. Same pattern, different names, different addresses, same buyer. Hail. Caleb's expression hardened. This isn't just land, he muttered. Axel shifted closer. Caleb turned another page. A note clipped to the front of a document. Systematic acquisition. Vulnerable owners. Possible fraud. He exhaled slowly. Then a sound. Closer this time. Inside the shop. A floorboard creaked. Axel's head snapped toward the door. Caleb's body reacted instantly. Light off. Folder closed. Movement silent. Someone had just stepped inside, and they weren't knocking. Caleb didn't breathe. The darkness inside the hidden room pressed in tight, thick enough to feel. He stood just off to the side of the door, body angled, one hand hovering near the edge, the other steady against the wall. Axel didn't move. But Caleb could feel him, low, coiled, ready. A second creak echoed through the shop. Closer. Slow steps. Not careless. Not loud. Whoever it was, they were trying not to be heard. Caleb's jaw tightened. 2, he whispered, barely sound. Axel's ears flicked once, confirming. Caleb shifted his weight slightly, positioning himself beside the doorframe. Not in front. Never in front. If it opened, he wanted angle, not exposure. The floor creaked again. Then a voice. Low. Back room. The second voice answered, closer now. Make it quick. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. Not fear. Calculation. Distance. Timing. Exit points. Back door. Blocked by them. Front. Unknown. Only one path left. Through. He leaned closer to Axel, hand brushing the dog's shoulder. Stay on me, he breathed. Axel's body tightened. Ready. The footsteps stopped just outside the hidden door. Silence fell again. Not empty. Waiting. Then, a hand hit the freezer. Metal scraped as it shifted just enough to reveal the seam. Found it, one of them muttered. Caleb's pulse slowed. Not faster. Slower. Everything narrowing down to a single line. The door handle rattled once. Didn't open. Locked from Caleb's side. Something's holding it, the second voice said. Move it. The freezer groaned again. The seam widened. Light from the shop cut through the edges of the door. Caleb's grip tightened. Axel lowered himself further, muscles trembling, not from fear, from restraint. The handle turned, stopped, then forced. The door jerked open halfway, and Axel moved. Not a bark, not a warning, just motion, fast, controlled. He hit the first man low, driving into his legs with a force that knocked him off balance before he could react. The man went down hard against the concrete, air rushing out of him in a sharp grunt. The second man shouted, stumbling back. Caleb was already moving. He stepped through the doorway, grabbing the fallen man's arm and shoving him flat, using momentum instead of strength. His knee pinned the man's shoulder just long enough to hold him in place. Not to fight. To control. The second man backed toward the front, hands up but not surrendering, just buying space. Easy, easy, he said quickly. We're just checking. Axel turned on him, teeth bared now, a low growl cutting through the room. The man didn't test it. He stepped back again, then turned and ran. The front door slammed open. Footsteps hit the street. Gone. Caleb didn't chase. Didn't break position. He held the first man down for one more second, eyes locked, reading him. Not trained, not disciplined, just hired. The man twisted under him, panic setting in. "We didn't know," he started. Caleb shifted his weight slightly, just enough pressure to stop the movement. "Who sent you?" Caleb asked. The man hesitated. That was answer enough. Caleb released him. Not gently, just enough to let him scramble away. The man didn't wait. He got to his feet and ran, stumbling once before disappearing out the front door. Silence slammed back into the shop. Heavy. Sudden. Axel stood in the center of the room, chest rising and falling, eyes still locked on the doorway. Caleb stayed where he was for a second longer, listening, tracking. No return footsteps. No second approach. Clear. For now. He stood slowly. Axel turned toward him, stepping close. Caleb reached down immediately, running his hand along the dog's shoulder, checking. That's when he saw it. A thin line of red, near the upper leg. Not deep, but there. "Damn it," Caleb muttered. Axel didn't flinch, didn't pull away, just stood there, steady, like nothing had happened. Caleb crouched, examining it closer. "Hold still." The dog obeyed instantly. The cut was shallow, probably from hitting something on the way in. Not serious, but enough to matter. Caleb exhaled slowly, tension bleeding out in pieces. "You're good," he said quietly. "You're good." Axel leaned slightly into his hand. Not weak. Just there. The bond between them wasn't something that needed words. Caleb stood and looked toward the front door. Open. Cold air drifting in. The shop didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt exposed. He turned back toward the hidden room. The door still open. The file on Hale still inside. Everything still there. But now, it wasn't just something his mother had left behind. It was something someone else was willing to break in for. Caleb's eyes hardened. "All right," he said under his breath, his voice quieter now, more certain. They made it a lot simpler. Axel stood beside him. Ready. Caleb stepped back toward the hidden room. No hesitation this time. Because whatever this was, it wasn't just a discovery anymore. It was a fight. Caleb didn't rush. That was the first decision. He closed the front door, locked it, then pulled the shade halfway down. Not enough to block the view completely, just enough to break a clean line of sight from the street. Control what others could see. Limit angles. Axel stayed near him, limping slightly now, but refusing to settle. "Easy," Caleb said, crouching beside him again. He pulled a clean strip from an old cloth he'd found earlier, pouring a bit of water over it, before pressing it gently against the cut. Axel didn't pull away, didn't even flinch. Just watched the door. "Still on watch, huh?" Caleb murmured. He wrapped the bandage tight enough to hold, loose enough not to restrict movement. "Practical. Temporary. We'll get you proper care," he added. "Just not here." Axel leaned his head briefly into Caleb's shoulder, then pulled back, alert again. Caleb stood, scanning the room one more time, the hidden door still open, the file on Hale still sitting inside. Everything unchanged, except now there was a clock on it. He stepped back into the hidden room and grabbed the Hale folder, flipping it open again, faster this time. Same pattern, same names, same quiet evidence of something bigger than a few bad deals. Systematic. Deliberate. He closed it and held it in his hands for a second, then nodded once. "All right. Decision made." He didn't put it back. He walked out, grabbed his pack from the corner of the shop, and slid the folder inside. Not hidden, not buried, just protected. Axel followed him step for step. Caleb paused at the door, listened. Nothing. He unlocked it and stepped outside. The street looked the same, empty. But he didn't trust that anymore. He moved toward the truck, keeping his pace steady, not rushed, eyes scanning reflections in the windows, tracking movement in peripheral vision, counting spaces without thinking. Axel stayed close to his left side, guarding. Caleb reached the truck, opened the passenger door first. Up, Axel jumped in without hesitation, settling into position, eyes already scanning through the glass. Caleb circled around, slid into the driver's seat, and shut the door. For a second, he just sat there, hands on the wheel, breathing. The same truck, the same seat. But it felt different now. Before, it had been the last thing he had. Now it was just a way out. The engine turned over with a rough growl. Caleb pulled onto the street, heading away from the shop. Not fast, not slow, just moving. A few blocks down, he caught it in the rear view, a black SUV pulling out from a side street. Not close, not aggressive, but there, following the same direction. Caleb didn't look at it again, didn't need to. He adjusted his route instead, turning left, then right, cutting through a narrow road that led out toward the edge of town. The SUV stayed back, distance constant. That was enough. Yeah, Caleb said quietly. Thought so. Axel's ears flicked. Caleb drove another mile, then slowed near an old gas station, half operational, a single pump lit under a flickering sign. He pulled in, stopped. The SUV kept going, didn't turn in, didn't stop, just passed. Caleb watched it disappear down the road, then exhaled. Not relief, just confirmation. They're watching, he said. Axel shifted beside him. Caleb reached over, resting his hand briefly against the dog's neck, which means we don't wait. He leaned back in the seat, eyes forward, thinking. Not about the shop, not about the door, about the next step. He pulled his phone from the console, scrolled once, stopped at a name he hadn't called in years. Rachel Kim, legal aid, last contact, 8 years ago, different life, different version of him. He hesitated for half a second, then pressed call. The line rang once, twice, then picked up. Caleb? Her voice hadn't changed, still steady, still sharp. Caleb leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing on the road ahead. Yeah, he said. I need help. A pause. Then, what kind? Caleb glanced at Axel, at the bandage, at the steady way the dog still held position, still watching. The kind, Caleb said slowly, that gets people in trouble. Silence on the other end. Not hesitation. Consideration. Where are you? Rachel asked. Caleb looked out at the empty stretch of road leading back toward Silver Creek, then ahead, toward whatever came next. On my way, he said. He hung up, put the truck back in gear, and drove. The road out of Silver Creek narrowed fast, trees closing in on both sides like the town didn't want to let go of anything that left it behind. Caleb didn't speed, didn't need to. Speed drew attention. Patterns kept you alive. Axel stayed upright in the passenger seat, head slightly lowered, eyes tracking every passing shape through the window. The bandage on his leg had darkened, but he didn't favor it much. Still working. Still present. Caleb glanced at him once. You're not sitting this one out, are you? Axel didn't respond. Didn't need to. The legal aid office sat just outside a larger town about 40 minutes south. A converted brick building with a faded sign and a parking lot that had seen better years. Caleb pulled in, parked near the side. Not the front. Old habit. He stepped out first, scanning the lot. 2 cars. 1 pickup. No one sitting inside. No movement. Clear, he muttered. Axel jumped down beside him, landing clean despite the injury. They moved together toward the door. Inside, the air felt different. Not stale, not abandoned. Just used. 3 desks filled the main room, papers stacked in uneven piles, a coffee machine humming quietly in the corner. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A woman sat at the far desk. Short hair, glasses, focused posture. Rachel Kim. She looked up before Caleb said anything. Eyes sharp, taking him in. The beard, the jacket, the dog, the way he held himself. You look worse, she said. Caleb gave a faint nod. Been worse. Her eyes dropped briefly to Axel, noting the bandage, then back to Caleb. You don't call unless something's broken, she said. Caleb stepped forward, pulling the folder from his pack and placing it on her desk. Yeah, he said. Something is. Rachel didn't touch it right away. She watched him for a second longer. Reading. Then she opened the folder. The room went quiet except for the soft shuffle of paper. Axel moved to the side of the desk, positioning himself with a clear view of the entrance. Guarding. Rachel flipped through the first few pages, then slowed. Her brow tightened. She turned another page, then another. Where did you get this? She asked without looking up. My mother's shop. Rachel glanced up at that. Your mother ran a flower shop. Yeah, Caleb said. Turns out she ran something else, too. Rachel went back to the documents. Her pace changed. Faster now. More focused. She reached the section marked Hale Holdings. Stopped. Read. Then read again. Her fingers pressed lightly against the paper. This is organized, she said quietly. Caleb didn't answer. He watched her instead. Watched the shift happen, from curiosity to understanding. Rachel leaned back slightly, eyes still on the file. Do you know what this is? She asked. Caleb shook his head once. Not officially. Rachel closed the folder halfway. It's a pattern, she said. Property transfers, below market value, questionable signatures. She tapped one of the pages. Some of these could be challenged individually. Her eyes lifted to his. But together? She let the thought hang. Caleb's jaw tightened. Together what? Rachel closed the folder completely. Together, it's a case. Silence settled between them. Not empty. Solid. Axel shifted his weight slightly, adjusting his stance, eyes still on the door. Rachel noticed. Dog's trained, she said. Yeah. He knows something's wrong. Caleb didn't deny it. Rachel leaned forward again. How many people are in here? She asked. Don't know yet. Rachel nodded slowly. That's the problem, she said. You don't build something like this unless it's bigger than what's written down. She opened the folder again, pulling out a few documents. These names, these are people, families. She looked at Caleb. If this is real, they need to come forward. Caleb's expression didn't change. They will. Rachel studied him for a second. You sure about that? Caleb thought of the journals, the entries, the way every name had been written like it mattered. They already trusted her, he said. That's a start. Rachel leaned back in her chair, processing, then nodded once. All right. She stood, gathering the papers into a cleaner stack. I'll start with what we have. Reach out where we can. See who answers. She paused, then added, but if Hale's involved like this, he's not going to sit still. Caleb didn't react. I know. Rachel's eyes moved to Axel again. Neither will they. Caleb followed her gaze. Axel stood steady, wounded, alert, ready. Caleb rested a hand briefly on the dog's back. He won't have to. Rachel picked up the folder. Give me 48 hours, she said. I'll tell you how bad this gets. Caleb nodded, then turned toward the door. Not rushing, not hesitating. Axel moved with him, step for step. As they stepped outside, the air felt sharper, colder, but clearer. Caleb paused beside the truck, looking back at the building for a second, not thinking about the fight. Not anymore. Thinking about the mission, because that's what it had become. Find the truth. Protect the people. Finish what was started. He opened the door. Axel jumped in. Caleb slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. This time, he didn't hesitate. Caleb drove straight back to Silver Creek. The mountains seemed closer now, pressing in around the road like they were watching, the same way everything else had started to feel. But his grip on the wheel stayed steady. No second guessing. No circling. Axel didn't lie down this time. He sat upright the whole drive, eyes forward, ears catching every sound that slipped through the cracked window. When the shop came into view, Caleb slowed. Not because he was unsure, because he was assessing. Same street, same dead storefronts. But now subtle differences. A car parked farther down the block that hadn't been there before. A curtain in the second building shifting just slightly, like someone had just stepped back. Caleb parked anyway, right in front. No hiding, no retreat. Let's finish it, he said. Axel jumped down beside him, no hesitation in his step. They entered the shop together. The air inside felt different again. Not abandoned, not threatened, just waiting. Caleb walked straight through the front room, past the counter, into the back. The freezer still sat pushed aside, the hidden door still open from before. No one had touched it. Not yet. He stepped inside. The room felt smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he just understood it better now. Axel moved ahead of him, checking the corners out of habit, then settling near the doorway, watching the outside, guarding the threshold. Caleb walked to the desk. The notebooks were still there. The files, the system, everything his mother had built, everything she had left behind. He reached for the lockbox, opened it. Inside, more documents. But this time, something else sat on top. A folded envelope, yellowed slightly at the edges, his name written across the front. Caleb. He stared at it for a long second. Didn't move. Didn't breathe. Then he picked it up. Careful, like it mattered. Because it did. Axel shifted behind him, pressing lightly against his leg, grounding him again. Caleb opened the envelope. The paper inside unfolded with a soft crackle. He read, slowly, "My son. If you're reading this, it means you stayed. That's all I ever hoped you would do. Not fix everything. Not carry what I couldn't. Just stay long enough to see it clearly. Caleb's throat tightened, but he kept reading. This place was never about flowers. It was about people who didn't have anywhere else to go. I couldn't save everyone, but I could make sure they weren't alone while they were here. That matters more than anything I could leave behind. Caleb's eyes drifted up for a second, taking in the room again. The files, the names, the lives, then back to the letter. If you choose to walk away, I understand. You've already carried more than I ever wanted for you. But if you stay, then you already know what to do. The last line was shorter, simpler. I never left you. I just ran out of time. Caleb lowered the paper slowly. The room felt quiet again, but not empty, not heavy, just full. Full of something that didn't need to be explained. Behind him, Axel let out a soft breath and settled onto the floor, resting his head near Caleb's boot. Caleb looked down at him, then back at the room, then toward the doorway, the shop beyond, the street beyond that. Everything still broken, still unfinished. He folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the envelope, then set it on the desk. Not hidden, not locked away. Just there. He walked out of the hidden room, didn't close the door, didn't push the freezer back, left it open. Axel followed. The front of the shop looked different now. Same dust, same broken glass. But it didn't feel abandoned anymore. Caleb moved behind the counter, picked up an old vase, cleared it with a quick rinse from the back sink. Not perfect, not clean, but usable. He stepped outside, walked to the edge of the street, looked around. The same quiet town, the same empty buildings. But now he saw something else. A woman across the street watching from a doorway. Not hiding, just waiting. Caleb nodded once, then went back inside, set the vase on the counter. Axel took position near the door, laying down but facing outward, eyes open. Still watching, still guarding. Caleb pulled a chair from the corner and set it near the front, facing the door, facing the street. Ready. He didn't put up a sign, didn't make an announcement, didn't need to. The door stayed open, and that was enough. Outside, the light shifted as evening settled in, casting a soft glow through the broken windows, stretching across the floor and into the back room, into the place that had once been hidden. Not hidden anymore. Caleb sat down, hands resting on his knees, Axel beside him, and they waited. Not for trouble, not for answers, for people. Because that's what the door was for. And this time, it wasn't closing. So here's what I want to ask you. If you were in Caleb's place, would you walk away or stay and fight for something that isn't even yours? Just type 1 if you'd stay. Type 0 if you'd leave. I read every comment. And if this story stayed with you, hit subscribe, because the next one might hit even closer to home. There's always another door. You just have to decide if you're ready to open it.